going to be welcoming a very special guest speaker, and you will be hearing very interesting, fun facts. But before we start, I do just want to thank you all for being a friend. If you are in this room, you are a friend to the park. We appreciate those of you who are members of the Friends group. If you're not, we hope and encourage and we'll be excited to have you join us formally. We appreciate all the support that you do provide. And the Friends takes care of lots of things that make your park better. We bought last year a marine resource vessel so that we can keep rescuing creatures that need rescuing, and that our divers can go out and get trained, and that my spouse can go help pick up garbage from the marine waters so they don't get swallowed by turtles. And we are right now working on a new project. Those of you who may use the beaches, we are going to be putting a new load of sand so that when you walk on the beach, you're not going to feel that you're walking across a lava rock experience. We are also going to be renovating the Dagny Johnson entrance, so it will be back to the state that it was when it was rescued from developers and became a park. So we hope that you will continue to support the Friends. We know that you continue to support the park every day, and we definitely appreciate each and every one of you being here tonight and always. So with that said, we've got programs coming up, and you should be able to see we're going to be doing another Delicate Balance of Nature on the Backs of Giants, which doesn't really refer to our park manager and the senior staff. It's going to be about all kinds of creatures that live on the backs of others. We're going to be doing a community paddle. FNO is our acronym for Friends Night Out. So just as you came out tonight, we hope you'll come out and do a paddle. And we're also, 'tis the season, it's a little chilly right now, but it's a great time to get out and take a walk. So you can hopefully join us for a nature walk at Penny Camp and a nature walk at Dagny Johnson. Both of those are really cool experiences, and they are bug-free. So take advantage. And now I'm going to turn the program over to my associate board member, Lindsay Shaw, who is our vice president and development chair. And she's going to be leading you through the rest of our program. So Lindsay, take it away.
Thank you, everybody. For those joining us on Zoom, you hopefully can hear me loud and clear. We do have some tech support in the back. If you are in the back 2 rows, you are in the opposite of the splash zone, the Zoom zone. And so there is a possibility that things you say might be picked up on the microphone for Zoom. So if you have things to say, please let them be nice and kind. And remember that the coconut telegraph is relentless. Couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you need to use the restroom, please be courteous to your folks around you, just like you're in a movie theater. We are all here to learn about flamingos. The restrooms are located outside in the lobby. You'll see one side is labeled women's and one side is labeled men's. They're underneath the tarpon. If you can't find your way, please come find a volunteer. We will help you find the most important room in the entire building. If you want water, there is a water fountain out in the lobby as well. So please make sure that your needs are taken care of, because if your needs are not taken care of, you are not going to be learning a thing. And why else are you here if not to learn something new? I would like everyone to reach in your pockets, purses, and take out this lovely device that keeps you connected to all of your loved ones. They do not need you again until 8:30. Please silence your cell phones. Don't be the guy that I'm looking at from the back of the room.
Where my cell phone is.
You don't know where your cell phone is, Jerry? Man, if only we could all be so lucky. Please take a moment, make sure it's on vibrate, so that way you're not the one who has to go, oh my gosh, why is my favorite 80s song playing in front of everybody? As Ann said, my name is Lindsay Cruz, or Lindsay Shaw now, sorry, I am recently married. I just goofed up in front of my husband. How embarrassing. How embarrassing. And I have the distinct pleasure to serve this park now as a volunteer, formerly as a ranger. And if you are interested, oh, see someone already. I heard it. And if you are interested in volunteering and learning about what makes this park so great, please come see me. Please come see anybody in a green shirt. And if you are a volunteer at this moment, please would you stand for everyone to see. There are a lot of you in this room tonight. Thank you all. Yeah, Terry, stand up. Terry collects garbage. We have volunteers present from every facet of our park this evening. If you are wondering how you can get involved, please come see one of us. We would love to tell you how much we love this park and what you can do. If you are like me, a millennial or younger, and you are like, oh my gosh, Lindsay, I have no time. Trust me, we can find time together. Please come see me and I can talk to you about some of our remote volunteering opportunities if you are not here year round. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. If you are in need of accessibility considerations, Florida State Parks are accessible for everyone. Please reach out to us ahead of time if you have a loved one, a friend, a family member who did not feel that they could come tonight because of some sort of another person twice. Oh man, make sure you take that guy out. Make sure if you think you turned it off before you got in here, double check. Oh my gosh, where was I? Accessibility. Yes. So if you have a friend, loved one, family member that you're like, they didn't think they would be able to come because of X, Y, and Z, please reach out to us and let us know. If we do not have a way to make it accessible, we can try to find a way to do that. That is a big part of what the Friends do, is include accessibility in the things that we are doing. As far as other housekeeping items, if you're like Lindsay, you forgot to mention X, Y, and Z. I come here and I hear Elena give the same talk all the time. I'm not Elena, but please come see me. I appreciate the feedback. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jeremy Lorenz, or as many of us know him, Jerry. Jerry is an estuarine ecologist whose life work has focused on understanding the delicate relationship between water management in the Southern Everglades and the health of the coastal ecosystems in Florida Bay. His research has beautifully connected the dots between fresh water flowing from the Everglades, the abundance of aquatic plants and small fish in the mangroves, and the nesting success of roseate spoonbills and other beloved wading birds. After earning his PhD from the University of Miami, Jerry joined Audubon Florida's Everglades Science Center in 2000 as research director, and by 2005, he was serving as research director for all of Audubon, Florida. Around 2015, he added another fascinating chapter to his work, helping explore the potential reestablishment of flamingo populations in southern Florida. For more than 35 years, Jerry has held long-term ecological studies throughout the Keys, helping to shape how we understand and protect these extraordinary ecosystems. Although he officially retired from Audubon in April 2025, retirement has not slowed him down much. He continues studying the water birds in the Keys, especially the pink ones. And he also serves on the Sanctuary Advisory Councils and many other advisory bodies throughout South Florida, helping to protect so many of the things that all of us know and love about this place. So please join me in a very warm welcome for Jerry Lorenz. We're going to do a quick tech switch.
Better you than me.
If you're a millennial, we could use your help.
It works, right?
I got to share to Zoom real quick and then we'll be good to go.
Okay.
Those pesky Zoom people. Let me make sure this works for you. Beautiful. No spoilers.
Okay. Can you hear me okay, or do I need to use the microphone? All right. Then.
Good.
Yep. Thank you. This is the third time I've been here to give a lecture. The first time I talked about fish, the second time I talked about the other pink bird, roseate spoonbills, and today I'm here to talk about flamingos. And so this is a fairly complex story, and so I'm just going to dive right in. Well, maybe I will. I don't know how to do that. We've been trying to do that for an hour.
Watch before you put it in the format.
Well, if you would like to come up here and move it, I would welcome you to do that. I can't even get the slides to change.
He's gonna cut off.
Slides are not moving.
Jerry, I had it. Do the forward button.
Okay. So let's see if we can. I need a preview on my. All right. So in late August of 2023, the Hurricane Idalia hit Florida, and it was a small tropical storm off the coast of the Yucatan that exploded over a 2-day period into a Category 4 storm. By August, within 3 days, it had moved across. It hit basically in the Panhandle area, eastern Panhandle area, and then moved through South Carolina. The strange thing about this storm, it was a big storm, but it dumped a whole bunch of flamingos across the eastern seaboard. This was just, again, I wish I could get rid of the thing at the top, but there were flamingo reports from all over Florida and all over the eastern United States. It got to the point where several hundred were reported in 2 days following the storm. People were out reporting flamingos while the storm was hitting. And this just shows you where all the places that flamingos ended up. And you got to remember the storm exited right there, and you had flamingos in Wisconsin. So you got to imagine that these birds really didn't want to be in that storm, that they would fly that far to get away from it. And so this brought up a lot of questions, and I am not kidding. I think I did 50 to 75 interviews in the month of September of 2023, talking about flamingos, a picture of CNN. And the big questions that I got were, where did they come from? Why are they so spread out? What will they eat? Will they survive? Will they stay? And the biggest one is, why aren't there more flamingos in Florida? And that's a good question. And that's what I'm going to answer tonight is, in about 2015, I had not done any work on flamingos. I collected some data about where I had seen them in Florida Bay. But in 2015, this particular bird, there were 3 of them, was at the Naval Air Station in Key West on Boca Chica Key. And the commander of the Naval Air Station didn't like big pink birds around his billion-dollar planes taking off and landing. So he called Zoo Miami and said, you need to come and take care of these birds or I will have to kill them. And funny thing was, Zoo Miami was looking for flamingos. They wanted wild flamingos. And so my colleagues at Zoo Miami went down, and out of the 3 birds, they captured 1 of them. The other 2 flew away and did not come back. And their whole reason for doing this was to put a tracking device on the flamingo and try to figure out where it would go when it was released. Thing is when they went to release it in just outside of the national park in Florida Bay, the state said, you can't release that bird because it's not considered a native species. You have to keep that in captivity. It has to be returned to Hialeah Racetrack or some other facility, and you cannot release it. And that's where I kind of got called in, is my colleagues, I didn't even know these guys at the time. We've become very good friends, but they called me from Zoo Miami and they said, because I was state director for Audubon of Florida, and he said, can you help us out here? I said, well, they don't know that that bird is an escapee. I said, we have 2 examples, and these are the 2. This happened after this event, but we had 2 birds that were banded as chicks in the Yucatan, and they were sighted in Florida Bay. And so I wrote a letter to the FWC saying, you don't know that that's a wild bird. You cannot just put it into captivity. And oddly enough, they listened to me. And so we'll get to that story in a minute. But the thing about flamingos is they're so ubiquitous in Florida. These are just some examples. These are postcards. And it's the Everglades, Miami Beach. You got the Florida Lottery. You got Hialeah Racetrack, which is really going to be something I talk about a lot in this talk. Disney World uses flamingos, right? And Bach Tower Garden. So this is, and then there's this, right? And I'll see if this works. Okay. That was like the most popular show in the 1980s, right? And it just shows those flamingos, and everybody associates Florida with flamingos. Oops. And so my colleagues and I got together, and after about a 4-hour conversation of me going, well, I think most of them are probably escapees. We got those couple. We decided that we were going to investigate how flamingos really existed in Florida historically. And my opinion is that yes, they existed in Florida historically, but the birds that we were seeing were basically escapees from Hialeah Racetrack or elsewhere. By the end of that conversation, I was convinced otherwise, and we ended up publishing this paper. And what we did, there's a few steps here, is this is the history of scientific literature about flamingos in the state of Florida, beginning in about 1827 and ending in 1902. And the important thing here is this column. I don't have a pointer, I'm sorry. But this tells you how many birds were sighted. And if you look at it, there is 500, 2,500, 1,000, greater than 1,000, 500 to 1,000. That's a lot of birds for them to be a non-native species. And this is 1827 to 1902. So flamingos were part of what existed in South Florida particularly, but throughout the state of Florida. We also have 19 specimens from Florida that were accepted into museums across the country. And again, that was over a 60-year period. That ended. There are no additional museum specimens until 1948, after 1918. So flamingos just kind of disappeared. 3 of the specimens were females that were ready to lay eggs. We also have 4 flamingo egg sets that were put into museums that said they were taken from nests in Florida. And there's one credible but controversial account of nest observed in the Lower Keys, I believe on Sugarloaf in 1903. And the question becomes is I think that's an authentic report, but there are people that were alive then that kind of disagree with that. And so flamingos, what happened to them is they were hunted. And initially they were hunted for food. John Audubon himself in 1839 said that they were hunted for food by locals in Key West in 1832. And this picture is a mock-up. I took this at the Audubon House Museum in Key West of a butchered flamingo in their kitchen. This was a common thing. Wardeman in 1860 accompanied a hunter who went out and found 500 flamingos and harvested 100 of them to sell for food in Key West. But that wasn't the only thing, is that about the 1860s or 1870s, it became very popular to wear feathers on your hat. And the end result is that flamingos with their pretty pink feathers were heavily targeted, and all of the wading birds were heavily targeted. And the bottom line was, between the desire to eat these birds and the desire to sell their feathers, they were basically hunted to extirpation in the state of Florida. Ingram reported in 1887 that hunting was of such a magnitude that he expected the Florida flamingo population to be gone. In 1902, Wardeman made the last reported observation of more than 100 flamingos in the state of Florida, and it took over 100 years for them to come back to that number. So after the plume hunting era ended, after it was outlawed that you couldn't hunt these birds anymore, we take a look at the history from 1905 to 1939, and notice the numbers now. The numbers aren't hundreds, they're 1, 1, 3, 1, 2. A big number right here is 14, about in the middle of the screen. And the interesting thing about that 14 is these are our friends again. Is in that year, 1931, it was the first time Hialeah Racetrack imported flamingos. They brought them in from Cuba. They turned them loose and didn't pinion their wings. Guess what? They flew away. And they flew to Card Sound Road. And that's why there were 14 at Card Sound Road. So the conclusion from the historical investigation was that flamingos were a natural part of our avifauna. There's some evidence that they nested. They were largely extirpated by 1905. And hunting throughout the Caribbean, not just Florida, really wiped the populations out. So there was about an 80% reduction in the total number of American flamingos in the Caribbean. And that's where this guy comes in. This is Robert Porter Allen. He established the Everglades Science Center in 1939. The Everglades Science Center has had 3 directors of research in its history since 1939. Bob Allen, Sandy Sprunt took over in 1962, I believe, and then I took over in 1995. And the thing about all 3 of us is all 3 of us have studied flamingos and roseate spoonbills. Bob also did whooping cranes. So he's the man that's attributed for saving the whooping crane from extinction. He also wrote these books. So each one of these is a scientific, basically a scientific account of each of these species, what was known at the time. And Bob was really quite brilliant. He's a really fascinating individual. So in his book about flamingos, he writes that there are estimated about 95,000 flamingos nested at 28 population units. This is prior to the plume hunting era. And he estimated then in 1952, when he published this account, that was down to about 20,000. So an 80% reduction, that's where that comes from. But the big thing was that they were only in 4 locations left. They're only nesting in 4 locations. And these remaining 4 locations, they were effectively protected, but they were way far away from Florida. One was in Managua, another one was in Venezuela. So these are very distant. The ones in Cuba were pretty much wiped out. And so why is this considered a non-native species is the question. I've shown you all the data and it's like, well, they were hunted to extinction. Well, that's where Bob Allen comes in again. He wrote in that book that everything that was observed since the 1930s, he considered to be escaped animals. The coincidence of them appearing at the same time as the Hialeah racetrack and 13 additional captive populations were put in place, the absence of observations from 1940 and 1950, the low numbers of the remaining flamingos throughout their range, they're rare birds, and the long distance to those nesting locations, all told him that what was happening was these birds were escaping, and that's what we would see. That's the 1s and the 2s that we would see here in the state of Florida. And so he established this idea that they were non-native. And it never went away. Nobody questioned it ever again until 2015. So right now, the range-wide recovery is that there are 260 to 330,000 estimated American flamingos in the wild. I think that's low. I think it's probably more like 500,000. And just an example, there was estimated 157,000 individuals in Cuba in 2004 at 6 major wetland nesting sites, the largest of which had between 22 and 51,000 flamingo nests. So these birds are nesting in huge numbers at particular locations. So what did we do? We wanted to look at the data since then. We wanted to look at what was going on in modern times. So we looked at data from 1915 to 2015, and we used a variety of sources. Here's just 2 examples from the Everglades Science Center, Christmas bird counts, and Audubon field naturalists to have sightings of flamingos. We also used eBird extensively. There's this program online called EdMaps, which is about introduced species, and people were reporting flamingos as an introduced species. And finally, my colleague Pete Frezza, who worked at the Everglades Science Center for about 20 years, he started in 2000 about just talking to fishing guides and anybody else who would talk to him about flamingos and noting every time they showed up in the state of Florida. And that proved to be just a wonderful data set. So our research results, 495 observations of over 3,000 flamingos in that 1950 to 2015 period. 60% of the observations and 70% of the flamingos were in Florida Bay or the Florida Keys. So we're on their home ground right now. I do want to stress, they were found throughout Florida, in the Panhandle, St. Augustine, several other locations. 26% of the observation and 26% of the flamingos were from the rest of the Everglades. So we're talking about 90% of these animals were Everglades. That's what they were focused on. And flamingos were observed in every month in Florida Bay over that 65-year period. So this wasn't just a seasonal migration. They were coming and going as they wanted. And so we analyzed this data, and I'm going to put up these 3 slides. This is the number of observations of flamingo from 1950 to 2015. And you can look at that and say, well, the numbers are obviously going up. But the other thing that was obviously going up was the number of people in Florida. And so if you got more people in Florida, more people are going to report seeing flamingos, right? Whether there are more flamingos or not, you're going to have more people seeing them. The second one is the total number of flamingos observed. So this is, again, just a count. But with more people, you're likely to see more flamingos. This one doesn't take that into account. This is just the maximum flock size. How big are the birds? This, in fact, works the other way. You're more likely to see a large flock of flamingos if you go back to the 1950s when there were fewer people. If there were big flocks, you were more likely to see them than ones and twos. But the numbers continue to go up. And in 2011, we actually had about 140 flamingos that hung out at one of the STAs in West Palm Beach County for almost a year. And so, again, you talk about escapees from Hialeah, for example. Hialeah didn't even have 140 flamingos, so they couldn't have come from there, right? What did I do now? Okay, so we published this and demonstrated that these flamingos were wild. And right then and there, the day it was published, FWC took down their non-native status, and they replaced it about 5 years later with this. So they recognized that flamingos were a native species, which we were very happy about. So sometimes science informs policy and has an impact. And we were very pleased about that. But here's the interesting thing. This was just published by my colleague, Stephen Whitfield. His graduate student, Jessica Folsom at UCF, published this just a couple months ago. And what it shows is they took the genetics they had feathers from museums, they had feathers that they collected from wild populations, they had feathers that they collected from captive populations, and they compared them all. And what they found was there's no difference. It doesn't matter if you're looking from the 1950s or now. These populations of flamingos are panmictic, meaning that one flamingo can breed with another anywhere within this range. And what that tells us is it doesn't matter if they're escapees. They're all the same. It's a viable population. The Hialeah racetrack essentially was an unsanctioned captive breeding program. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service should have been paying them to do this. So let me get back to Conkey. After he's captured, we released him. I did not do this. This was again, this is Frank Ridgely at Zoo Miami. And you'll see a couple pictures of Frank in here. And this is them releasing the bird just outside of Everglades National Park. They couldn't release it in the national park, but they could go kind of right up to the line. And when it flew away, it went into the national park. So, okay. Anyway, so this bird was equipped with a tracking device. It gave us 4 GPS fixes a day. At the end of this, it was out there for 660, almost 2 years. And we had 1,267 positive GPS fixes on it. The transmitter failed shortly after Hurricane Irma. We don't think that the storm killed the bird. We just think it had probably flooded the transmitter and made it just broke it. But this is where the birds were. So each one of these red circles is a center for where this bird was. And for almost the first year and a half, it was at these 3 locations: State Key first, Captain's Key next, and then Club Key. And if you zoom in on these, this is where the birds were. The bird was. It was inside these keys. These keys are off limits to anybody landing on them. They're closed to public access. And so nobody saw this bird. We actually went out to Pete and I actually went out to State Key to make sure it was still alive, because nobody saw it. Nobody was reporting it. And so finally, when it went to snakebite over here, there's a boating channel in there. A lot of people use snakebite for fishing. And so that's when people saw it. So for the first year and a half, nobody reported this bird on eBird. 13 of the 15 reports that came in over that 661-day period were from snakebite. So my point here is that if these pink birds, 5 feet tall, if they don't want to be seen, you won't see them. You would think that they'd be easy to spot. They are not. And so this just shows, this is one of the analyses we did. It just shows that they were in the islands. This is the habitat types in Florida Bay, and it shows that they were on the bank tops. So these birds really were hiding on these islands. This bird was. And this is just a picture of our conclusions based on this, was that Habitats within Florida Bay can support flamingos for multiple years, at least 661 days, maybe longer, but we haven't resighted conky. This picture that I got up here is really, if you squint, you can kind of see a little blue right here, and that was after the hurricane. So we think that conky survived the hurricane, it's just the transmitter failed. So the conclusions from all of our work to this point, all three of these studies, was between about 1880 and 1905, flamingo numbers were reduced by at least 80%. Currently, flamingos numbers range-wide appear to have rebounded. So the flamingos are coming back, and they're doing very well, particularly in the Yucatan and in Cuba. American flamingos were a natural part of Florida's avifauna. We shouldn't be treating them as an exotic species. Their historic range in Florida may have been statewide, was statewide. We do know that. But primarily, yeah, there's a southern Florida bird. And Everglades restoration efforts really helped. Current Everglades habitats were historically flamingo population centers capable of supporting flamingos for long periods, as was demonstrated by conky. But I saw my first flamingos in the wild on Sandy Key in 1992. There were 29 of them. They didn't hang out but a couple of weeks. Now we have them sticking around for years at a time. And I believe that's because we're treating the state a little better. When I moved here in 1989, the reason I moved here was because Florida Bay was dying, if not dead. And so we've improved the conditions for these birds. So let's get back to the hurricane. Again, what we see is there's a tropical storm circling between the Yucatan and Cuba. And then on the August 29th, it blew up into a hurricane. By August 30th, it was a Category 4 storm. It made landfall as a Category 3 storm in that Gulf Coast area. And the interesting thing about flamingos, this is from the people that study them in Mexico, the nesting habitats, is that they regularly fly back and forth between Cuba and the Yucatan. These birds can fly thousands of miles without a problem. They really are, it doesn't faze them. And so the movement back and forth between Cuba, the Yucatan, and Florida just really isn't that big a deal. And what we think happened here is when that storm exploded right here, when it blew up, that there was a flock of undetermined number of flamingos flying across. And they either got pushed by the storm north, they either got captured in the eye as it formed, and that would be really unpleasant if you were a bird flying for 3 days in a circle. And, hundreds of miles an hour winds spinning around you, or they could have followed it. That's happened before too, where they just went, oh, we want to go that direction, so we'll use the storm. Regardless, this is what we ended up with, is just all of these flamingos throughout Florida. And again, there's a whole lot of press about this. You can just see that everybody was talking about flamingos after that storm. And one of the big things that we found was, I showed you those 3 banded birds that were prior to the storm that were banded in the Yucatan. Well, we got 5 more within a couple of weeks of that storm. So these are just 2 of them. These were taken by my friend Garl Harold out at Snakebite. And it just shows you, 2 of the birds. And here's a 3rd one. And this bird was on Grassy Key on September 5th. And a year and a half later, it was back in the Yucatan on a nest. So this really is starting to tell us that these birds came from the Yucatan. This is Peaches. So Peaches was in the upper corner there. That's Peaches in a fishing net. There are a couple of fishermen out in the water, and they found this bird swimming. This was off of the coast of St. Pete Beach. And they rescued it, and they took it to a rehab facility. And this is Frank again and myself. We put a tracking device and a band on the bird. That's right after we got done. The big thing on the left leg, I think, is the transmitter. And we also marked it with a alphanumeric band that said USO2. Honky was USO1. Those are the only 2 bands ever put out in flamingos in the United States. Interestingly enough, we released it into the wilds of Tampa Bay, and there's a picture of that. And it got a lot of press. And then, unfortunately, the transmitter died within a week after we put it out. So we didn't know what happened to Peaches after it left Tampa Bay. We do know it went to Marco Island for at least a day because we got pictures from there, but then it just vanished. Well, about 6 months ago, showed up in the Yucatan on a nest raising young. So that's peaches. We used this as far as Audubon went. We really wanted to use this as a learning tool about the Everglades and about Everglades restoration. So, you know, our talking points in all of this communication was they're native to Florida. They were hunted to near extinction. They are finally reaching their pre-plume hunting numbers and are returning to Florida naturally. These are not escapees. And most importantly, wetlands protection and restoration, particularly Everglades restoration, have created conditions in South Florida that can sustain and return a resident population. Like I said earlier, when I arrived, that was not going to be possible. And this proved really worthwhile. This is just one of the graphics that Audubon of Florida uses every year to talk about, you know, their media presence and what the topics are. And so, for example, our Center for Birds of Prey in 2023 had 66 media hits. That would be social media or standard news outlets. Our biggest thing every year is generally Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. Everglades, without flamingos, we had 46 stories. With flamingos, 185. So we really got this message out there. So what comes next? And that's just talking about the storm itself. How many of these birds came over? And this is a publication that I hope to be putting out within the next month or so. And so we did the same thing. We repeated the study that ended in 2015 for the next couple of years. And so we got on eBird. We looked at the data that was there. There were 66 reports of flamingos on August 30th alone. That's the day the hurricane was hitting the coast. So there was a whole lot of people out there seeing these things. More than 250 individual birds reported on Facebook, 50 email reports. These are all coming to me. Other social media outlets. This was chaos, right? It was just trying to, and now that we're able to sit back and distill all this information. We downloaded all flamingo reports in eBird from the month before the storm till the end of March in 2024, 6 months after the storm. It's a messy data set. It's still difficult to use, but we have really gotten a lot of usable information, statistically usable information about this. We sorted the data by the highest number reported in a given county. And the whole point of that is, for example, here in Monroe County, on the same day, we could have had 15 birds in the upper keys and 5 in the lower keys, not reported at the same time. Who's to say that those 5 birds didn't just fly up and join the 10 and make 15? So we were really trying to figure out how to not duplicate. And so what we were using was the largest number from an individual county. And yeah, county lines are kind of close, but we thought that would be the best way to do this. And then we calculated the daily, weekly, and monthly total for all the counties reporting flamingos. The largest number of individuals on a single day was 97 from 8 counties, and that was September 23rd. So that was about a month after the storm. The interesting thing here is that the next day, among those 97, the 60-something that were out in Florida Bay were not counted. They were counted the next day. So you can see we're doing daily just really is kind of unsatisfying. It really doesn't allow you to get a good feel for how many birds were out there. The highest number of counties in a single day was 13, lots of those, lots of 12s. And it's just, you know, this doesn't really tell us that much. When we go to weekly, okay, the largest week was 156 individuals from 14 counties, again, about a month after the storm. The maximum number of counties was 25 from 830. And the weeks following that, so just the week after the storm, was the largest one for the number of counties. In chronological order, it goes from 19 to 20 to 14 to 17 to 19. Eventually, it gets down to single digits. And what this is telling us is that these birds are, number one, finding each other. So they're not so spread out. They're coming together. They're coalescing in bigger flocks. They're also moving south. They're coming into the state of Florida from Wisconsin, for example. Because, you know, Wisconsin gets a little cold. And so we did it by month. And again, to reiterate, If Monroe County had in the month of, say, September 2023, if there were 20 reports and the largest one was 50, we just used the number 50 for that month. That was our highest. So the month after the storm, September 2023, had 279 individuals from 39 counties. And we think this is a pretty solid estimate. We think about 300 birds were probably, a lot of them, well, we know quite a few died in the process. There were birds that died shortly after landing. They were exhausted. But this suggests that about 300 birds came over. The second highest month was, the month after, October, 140 individuals, 29 counties. Third month, November, 121 from 16 counties. And again, this is just telling you that they are coalescing and moving around in larger flocks and heading south, but not all of them. In February of 2024, 6 months after the storm, we commissioned a survey of people. We sent it out on social media, in the Audubon magazine, just saying, hey, we need to know how many flamingos there are from the week of February 19th, 2023. That should be 2024. I'm sorry, that's a typo. For that week, we wanted people to report how many flamingos they saw. And we got some pretty good responses. We got 43 responses. There were also 9 eBird responses during that week. We filtered to weed out people reporting roseate spoonbills because everybody does that. And we concluded that at that time, this is 6 months after the storm, there were still more than 100 flamingos in the state of Florida. So they are staying. They're not going anywhere. And just in July of this year, Mark Cook, another colleague who's part of our group here, spotted 125. He took this picture of 125 flamingos flying in Florida Bay. There's a close-up of 3 of them. So these birds are here. We kind of speculated this when the hurricane hit. Would they stay? Would this be the impetus to finally have these birds stay in the state of Florida? And the answer is pretty much yes. I mean, we get reports every week from not just Florida Bay, but Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, from Pine Island Sound. These birds are here. And so the ultimate question is, will they nest? We don't know that they nested here historically, but we believe that they probably will as climate change has an impact on the tropics. We think Florida Bay, especially the Everglades, is going to become really a hotspot for these birds, because the places that they are in, the 4 major nesting areas, the Yucatan, Cuba, Venezuela, and Anagua in the Bahamas. Anagua has a problem with pigs ruining their nesting. Venezuela and Cuba have socioeconomic problems that we have to worry about. And Mexico is basically watering and dewatering their wetlands to help these animals. So they're getting subsidies to be around. In Florida, in Everglades National Park, that might be a great stronghold for them in the upcoming years. And then I just want to put this up here. So Florida House passes picking a new state bird. 10 years ago, they told me this was not a native species. It passed the House 112 votes in favor to 1 against. So we might have a new state bird. We'll see what the Senate has to say about that. I want to just put this up here. These are at the Everglades Science Center. We have had a lot of support over the years, particularly over the last decade. These are some of the people that have supported our research, particularly Ron McGill Foundation, Zoo Miami, the Lewis Wolfson Foundation, Ocean Reef Conservation, who gave us wine out there, the same guys. Yeah, they supported this. And I just want to point out to them. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
When you were at the town when the birds came in Wisconsin.
Oh, really?
So about a month, yes, apparently. So the big questions, of course, was out there for probably you already asked. I'm not sure the answer. Would they survive eating up in private water? Stay from the Great Lakes. Then the second side, about 100 miles west of us, a big lake, limit cell, and we didn't know, everybody said they didn't really have a homing device that
Oh, yeah, they do.
somewhere, either Florida or.
Yeah, they know exactly where they are. Yeah, and that was the big question is would they actually, would they know where to go? Because they would be disoriented by the storm. But flamingos show, there are 6 species of flamingos, and they all show a homing pattern. They have basically a compass in their head. So they know when they're going in a particular direction. And they had no problems navigating that. So some of the banded birds, for example, one of the birds was banded in North Carolina, and then it was found at Merritt Island and then Florida Bay. So these birds know, where to go. There's also a bird that moved around the Midwest and then ended up in Louisiana and ultimately back in the Yucatan as well. So, like I said, these birds will fly thousands of miles. It's not a problem. just to prove this, they're Caribbean species, right? And this is where they nest and live, except for, a couple thousand out in Galapagos Islands in the Pacific Ocean. That's the same species. So they didn't walk there, right? So it is possible. And that, just for your point, I got a phone call. I grew up outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. And I got a text from an old friend who still lives there. And she says, they just saw 2 flamingos at Cedar Creek. And I'm like, Cedar Creek in Key Largo? And it's like, no, Cedar Creek, Ohio. And I'm like, that didn't happen when I was a kid. So, anyways, yes. Have they found that in Florida? No. Flamingos build mud nests. They look like little mud volcanoes. And we got plenty of mud out in the Everglades. So it's possible that they are nesting out there right now, and we're just not able to find them. That was my point with if they don't want to be seen, they're not going to be seen. And I got to tell you, I know for a fact, because I waded through all of it, that there's plenty of mud out there for them to build nests. Yes, sir.
Climate change, what happened is the ecosystem, food supply, water temperature, and all those things. Is it similarly conducive to what it would have been 60, 100, 150 years ago? And is that something that's making them move around more?
That is a really good question, and I wish my speculation, if you just want me to opine on that, is absolutely there's going to be changes, and that is why they're moving. I think that global climate change is particularly sea level rise, which we've demonstrated has pretty much decimated the spoonbill population here in Florida Bay. And spoonbills are doing fine in the Everglades. They're just not here in Florida Bay anymore. When I started working here, there were 500 or 600 nesting pairs. This year we got 200. So the numbers are going down. And I do believe that's the same for flamingos, is they are going to be looking for new habitats because the temperature is going to change their food resources as the world gets hotter. And again, that's why I think Florida is going to be really critical to this species. Yes. 50 years at least. Sandy Sprunt banded a flamingo on Anagua in 1976, I believe. One of my colleagues at Audubon was going through the Anagua colony in it was 49 years. So, and he found a recently dead bird that was in perfect shape, not at all full plumage covered. Sandy banded that 49 years earlier. I believe 7, but that I don't know for a fact. That's my guess. I have read that it's 7, but there's the same thing with spoonbills. I was told that spoonbills live 7 years and they start reproducing at 3. What we found with our banding program with spoonbills is that they probably live to about 25 or 30 years old. We have records of birds that I put bands on that are 18, 19 years old and are still nesting out in Florida Bay. And so this concept is that if you're going to take 3 or 4 years to reach sexual maturity, you're going to be reproducing. You're not going to die 3 years later. That just doesn't make any sense. So it's the same thing with flamingos. They probably a little bit later than most wading birds, but they're really long lived. Yes. They definitely set up pair bonds. And there was a study done on captive populations of flamingos, and they tend to organize kind of similarly to bottlenose dolphins in groups of 3, oddly enough, instead of 2. We don't know why that is, but they also set up these really complex social things where like this group of 3 and this group of 3 will hang out, but they won't hang out with that group over there, right? And so it's just like our social groups, right? It's like, I haven't been to a party with you yet, but maybe someday we'll do that. So, yeah.
When they nest and they lay their eggs, are they 1, 2, 3?
1 egg. There are rare cases of 2. Probably about 5% of the nest might have 2 eggs, but it's 1, and that's why it's so devastating for like in Inagua with the pigs, is because it takes a couple of pigs no time at all to ruin several hundred nests, right? So, yeah. Cuba. They were imported from Cuba. The first time was, I think, like I put in there 1931, and they flew away. And then in 1935, they brought in another 40 or 50. They pinioned those. They cut trimmed their primary feathers. And at its peak in the 1970s, there were, I believe, 600 or 700 flamingos at Hialeah, and they had 300 to 400 nests on an annual basis. That has dropped to, they haven't nested in the last 4 or 5 years. And that's probably because of, look at Miami. Yes, Susie. What's that? Okay, Susie.
Did autumn find Mingo nest first part of the question in the Keys?
No.
Did not find it. What facilitates them to nest? I read something that they need a certain amount of population numbers to stimulate nesting, like they have to have enough of them to start nesting, and then they don't nest every year.
No, that's very true, is that the same flamingos do not nest every year. And they do nest generally in huge numbers. And, we are talking about like where Peaches was. He was in with like 3,000 other nests, right, when he was discovered. So they do have that very strong social component where they're all going to get together. And it's fun because, you got these nests that are about like that far apart, and then the 2 birds just squabble at each other for months. And it's like, so, but they also have been reintroduced. I forget what, Necker? There's a Caribbean island where we could do the same thing here. They just basically went in and they had flamingos that were coming in from Bonaire, and they just built these mounds, and 9 or 10 of them just started nesting. So you can do this. And like I said, Everglades National Park really isn't into that sort of thing, but we can do national wildlife refuges, right? The Great White Heron and Key Deer National Wildlife Refuge. Those might be good spots. And, if you're out there, take a shovel, build a mound, see what happens. All right.
Fantastic. Can we give Jerry another round of applause?
Thank you. Thank you.
Jerry, you gonna be hanging out to answer questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Jerry says he's gonna hang out to answer questions. If you had a burning question that you did not have a chance to get answered, for those of you that have raffle tickets, go ahead and pull them out. We do have prizes. We do have prizes tonight. If your raffle ticket is pulled, you are going home with a Friends of John Cunningham tote bag. Yeah, thank you. Appropriate response. And wait for it. A Friends of John Cunningham. Excellent. And